ਆਪਾਂ ਜੋ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਇਹ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕੀਤਾ ਸੀਗਾ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕੀਤਾ ਸੀ ਕਿਸਾਨਸ ਬਾਰੇ, ਕਿਸਾਨਸ ਇਨ ਨੀਡ, ਤਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਬਾਰੇ ਅਪਡੇਟ ਆਪਾਂ ਤਕਰੀਬਨ ਡੇਲੀ ਪੜ੍ਹਦੇ ਹਾਂ। ਐਂਡ ਉਹ ਇੱਕ ਵਿਅਕਤੀ ਦੇ ਬਦੌਲਤ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਰੋਜ਼ ਟਵਿੱਟਰ 'ਤੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਅਪਡੇਟ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਆ ਕਿ ਅੱਜ ਕੀ ਹੋਇਆ ਕਿਸਾਨ ਦੀ ਅਪਡੇਟਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਕੀ ਨਹੀਂ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਕਿਹੜੇ ਕਿਹੜੇ ਮੁੱਦੇ ਆਏ, ਕਿਹੜੇ ਕਿਹੜੇ ਨਹੀਂ, ਕੌਣ ਜੀ ਅਰੈਸਟ ਹੋਇਆ, ਕੌਣ ਉੱਥੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਦੀ ਅਨਫੋਰਚੂਨੇਟਲੀ ਪੂਰੇ ਹੋਏ ਜੀ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਆਪਾਂ ਅੱਜ ਗੱਲ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਜੀ, ਉਹ ਵਿਅਕਤੀ ਨਾਲ ਜੋ ਕਿ ਰੋਜ਼ ਐਵਰੀ ਡੇ ਲਾਈਕ ਅ ਡਾਇਰੀ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਦੱਸ ਰਿਹਾ ਜੀ ਕਿ ਆਹ ਹੋਇਆ, ਆਹ ਨਹੀਂ, ਇਨ ਈਵਨ ਇਨ ਮੋਰ ਡੀਟੇਲ ਦੈਨ ਜੋ ਦ ਨਿਊਜ਼ ਚੈਨਲਸ ਆ। ਸੋ ਜਗਜੀਤ ਸਿੰਘ ਜੀ, ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ ਜੀ। ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ, ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ। ਜਗਜੀਤ ਸਿੰਘ ਜੀ, ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਆਹ ਸਵਾਲ ਪੁੱਛ ਰਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਜੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਰੋਜ਼ ਟਵਿੱਟਰ 'ਤੇ ਘੱਟੋ ਘੱਟ 20 ਤੋਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ 30 ਪੁਆਇੰਟਸ ਕਿਸਾਨਾਂ ਬਾਰੇ ਜੋ ਮੋਰਚਾ ਚੱਲ ਰਿਹਾ ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਅਪਡੇਟ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਆ ਜੀ ਕਿ ਆਹ ਹੋਇਆ ਸੋਸ਼ਲ ਮੀਡੀਆ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ। ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਹ ਕਿਉਂ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਆ, ਕੀ ਇਹਦੀ ਵਜ੍ਹਾ ਹੈ ਫॉर ਡੂਇੰਗ ਦਿਸ?
Okay. Before I answer that question, I think it's important ਕਿ ਸਾਰੇ ਦਰਸ਼ਕਾਂ ਦਾ we do ਸੰਦਾਂਜਲੀ to the victims of Indiana yesterday. ਉਹ ਸਾਡੇ ਬਜ਼ੁਰਗ ਆ, and there was 95% of the people that worked in FedEx were Punjabis. I've been fortunate enough to speak in Indiana at the Gurdwara Sahib. There's a very strong Gursikh community there, and unfortunately some individual who was had issues decided to go and shoot some of the Buzurgs. So we have our sympathies from UK to all of them, in all our Gursikh Bhai Band in America, khas karke in Indiana. In terms of what you're saying, Viji, I believe it's very important to document history. I believe if we do not document our history, other people will come and rewrite our history from their own narratives. Okay. I've personally had this. I've experienced this in my own family because on my visits to India, my Buzurgs told me that in the past, one of my great-grandparents was a Babur Akali and were hanged by the British, which I didn't know until I went to that bend and I saw the gate at the front. But then later on, because I like to read and understand, the Indian government wrote a book on his life, but they called him a communist and didn't mention that he was Amartari or his Gursikh virtues. He had no interest in communism. He was a Puran Gursikh. But what had happened is after 1947, writers were employed who had their own bias. A lot of them were communists, and they rewrote the books on freedom fighters and called them from their own narratives. And our Gursikh histories then gets disappeared. In the same way, I can see in the Kisaan Morchas in the future, Bollywood actors will make their own movies and make Modi and the BJP into heroes. I know you just don't know what's going to happen. So it's important that we have our own narrative. If we could look at 1978 to 1995, all of that history, and we could have had a daily diary for people that study history, they could see the patterns. So when you look at the daily updates, it has 30 odd points, but in there's patterns. And through the patterns, you find out what are the policies, who are the actors, who are the characters, and what are they doing. And then you understand what is the real narrative of what's going on. So if I was to say to you that apne kai bari Punjabiyan no, we don't know the qeemat of our land. ਅਸੀਂ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਸੋਚਦੇ ਆ ਉਹ ਜ਼ਮੀਨ ਵੇਚ ਦਈਏ, ਇੱਥੇ ਹੋਰ ਇਨਵੈਸਟਮੈਂਟ ਕਰੀ ਜਾਈਏ, and we don't realize actually before 1947 that land did not only feed India, it fed the whole of that region, going back to the southern part of Russia, certain parts of China, all the way as far as the Middle East. And in the video that I made, I mentioned that my father witnessed trucks going from our farm to the Shah of Iran for food supplies. That's what it was. But after 1947, in the Green Revolution, because India was in such need of food, that trade, that commerce was taken away and it was kept so that this would be the breadbasket of India. The other thing is, ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਨੁਕਸਾਨ ਕਾਫੀ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ ਸੀ by losing Lahore. Lahore is a major mandi and it's a major intellectual, and it was the center of Punjab's Soj and freedom, etc. And intentionally, it was taken away from Punjab. When the Cyril Radcliffe line of 1974 or 1947 was drawn, there was two things. One was to make sure that a Brahmin is always in control of India. So if you take the Muslim vote and divide it by Pakistan and Bangladesh, then what would happen is whether it's Congress or BJP, it's still Brahmin Raj. And the other thing that they feared was Punjab. So you take the center of Punjab and you split it in half and you give part of it to Pakistan, but then you intentionally give Lahore to that, even though if you look at how far Amritsar is from Lahore to Nankana Sahib, you know, you can actually take a picture from a plane and you can see it. You know, when that plane goes above Amritsar, I don't know, many people when they go to India, they see these things. When you're flying up, you can see the lights of Lahore. That's how close it is. Anna? And that was our intellectual center. That was Maharaja Ranjit Singh's center and everything. And this is, if Punjab would not have the water issues, Punjab would not have the education issues, Punjab would not have any of these commerce issues if we still had Lahore. And so we have to understand the wider picture of what's happening here.
So essentially, by documenting this stuff and documenting the daily events, you're creating a sort of journal or sort of manual for future generations to say, well, actually, this is what happened, and also eradicating the chance of history being rewritten. As we often see, as the British have rewritten a lot of the history about the imperialism and about the empire. And, you know, we've seen a lot of empires tend to do that and tend to eradicate their history and change the narrative on it.
This exact Morcha, because history repeats itself, it goes in cycles. This exact Morcha happened 100 years ago. Okay. And it went on for over, I think it was just over a year and a bit. And that's where Bhagat Singh's Chacha was involved. And that's why eventually he had to go abroad, etc. And most of Punjab, because the British were trying to do exactly the same thing. They recognized that the land of Punjab is the most fertile land in that region, even though we have water issues. But what happens is, what you have to understand about the water issues is controlled by the people that want to do the land grab. So ਜਦੋਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਜ਼ਮੀਨ ਹੋ ਜੂਗੀ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਕੋਲ water issues ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋਣੇ, ਉਦੋਂ ਸਾਰਾ ਪਾਣੀ ਖੁੱਲ ਜਾਣਾ. But if they want to do a land grab, then what you do is you make it as difficult as possible for the people. So Geo and some of these organizations, they're creating their own seeds. So what would happen before is, if you had a crop, you would use the seeds from that crop to get the next crop. The seeds that they're creating are made it so you always have to go back every time and buy more seeds from the actual these companies.
So you're saying corporations are making it hard for the armed farmer in an ultimate attempt to try and grab their land or benefit themselves.
What I've tried to do in the daily updates is to give the wider picture, not just the personalities and who's passed away, because that's essential, but understand the bigger picture. Now, a lot of people don't understand. People will hear, people watching this, they will hear of people like Elon Musk, and they will hear how Tesla's revolutionized electric cars. They will hear about Amazon, how it's revolutionized retail. What they might not realize is that one corporate, whose name we all know, has actually had more wealth, according to Bloomberg, grabbed during lockdown than both Elon Musk and Amazon. He's created more actual wealth as a billionaire. And you have to understand what's actually happening in India. Because of lockdown, a lot of the labor went from the cities back into the population. So the amount of people involved in agriculture in India was close to about 45% of the population. That's now gone over to 55% because people realize I'm talking about all of India, not just Punjab. Now, what's actually happening is you are taking the livelihoods of half the population of India to make the two richest people in India even richer. There's no logic in that. No government would ever think like that unless that government realizes that it's coming to the end of its second term and these are the people that are funding its party, and therefore they basically are more interested in keeping these people happy than its actual, and many of these farmers are suffering. They're the vote bank of this actual party.
We see similar stuff going on in the UK with the corruption, especially around the COVID schemes and insurance.
You see with Tories and PPE
and
everything else.
We see all of that, and currently that's going on, and the lobbying that's going on. Also, let's talk about the book here.
Okay.
Why Am I Here? Tell us a bit about this book and what it's about and why you've written it.
So this is not actually written by myself. It's a part of an organization which I do seva. Morcha I do seva with about 15 different organizations, of which one is called Share Charity. So Share Charity, a lot of the Sangat might know about Share Charity from Sikhi to the Max, because that was created 20 odd years ago, and you see it in virtually every Gurdwara, and it's even in Darbar Sahib now, where you get the translations. So after that, they created various apps that you can freely download, from learning Punjabi to Super Sant to many of these other things. So what happens with Share Charity is they have strategy days, and they had one actually today. as well. So where they think about what do we need in the Panth at this moment in time to take our Panth forward. And so 2 years ago, they're having this discussion that if your neighbor wanted to know about Sikhi, let's say he's a Gora and he wants to know about Sikhi, what book would you give him? Or let's say your child now is at an age where they want to know, they say, Dad, why do you wear the star? Or why do we do this? Or what is the Guru Granth Sahib, what is written in it? And we thought about what is the key book we would give someone as their first read on Sikhi. And then we realized if you go to Jehovah's Witnesses, you go to Christians, they'll have like 10, 15 of them.
Yeah, they will have
I
a
know.
leaflet or something.
And we didn't have anything that we would say this is really just touches people. And so we thought, as it's not created, let's create it. So Bhai Tarseem Singh was given the job of writing this book. It's called Why Am I Here? So this is now available on Amazon. Anyone can go and order it. We're releasing it in Canada in the next month, but it's in UK as well, and it's going to go around the world. We see this as a large 10-year project where we want this. This is actually, one Gursikh has actually funded this to go into all the prisons. And another Gursikh, we're taking funding who are going to send it to every secondary school in UK. But for example, this week we had a letter from a black person who's a Muslim in a prison. He was given the book by Manveer Singh, who's a chaplain. And he wrote a letter to share charity, how this book has totally changed his perspective on life. I know. So this is a very powerful book. I would ask people, it's very easy to read. It's made for anyone who's 12 years and above. And we want this to be the book that every Sikh will give anybody else.
Who wants to learn about
Yeah, so you might have people like we've got a Singh in Bradford. You know? He owns a large gas company. And he kept his case through Sangat with the Gursikhs there. And rather than talking to them individually, he just called them all one day and had a meeting with them. And he said, I'm going to be now keeping my case. You're going to see me changing. And he did a full presentation to them. This is Sikhi and this is why I'm making these changes. And we're saying that we're giving you the resources to explain to people what is the message of Guru Nanak and its context in the modern times. So this is what this book is. It's very simple read. And like I said, we're getting fantastic feedback on it. There's already large shipments have gone to Canada. And we're going to do USA next, in Australia, Malaysia, etc. And then we've got other projects that we've discussed today, which are already in the pipeline and then we're coming through. But the key thing I would say to everyone about if you give me this one, ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਐਦਾਂ ਨਾ ਹੋਵੇ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਮੋਰਚੇ ਦਾ ਜ਼ੋਰ ਲੱਗ ਜਾਵੇ ਤੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਬਜ਼ੁਰਗ ਉੱਥੇ ਬੈਠੇ ਰਹਿਣ. So when I saw what was happening with loads of Punjabis went to London, and it had huge, you didn't realize that so many Punjabis were just suddenly got in their cars and just went. But at that time we were in lockdown. On lockdown khullan na gaya. You know the dates. There's a date in April. There's going to be a date in June. Hana? What we need to do is send the message from UK to everybody around the world, particularly the BJP. But if something happens in UK, very quickly happens in Toronto, Vancouver, California, Melbourne, Sydney. So if the UK Sangat start coming together and thinking, well, if lockdown's going to open in June, where's our big protest for the farmers? Because Sade Buzurg ta haj bhi utthe baithe hai. So on today's update, you will see a picture of Buzurg who's sitting there. He's having his prashada. He's sitting on a mat, and there's mosquitoes there and everything. And he'll still be there. That Buzurg that got hit in the eye, that Baba Santokh Singh, he's still there. You see a picture of him today. I put it on again, where he's doing malish or bibi on their hands, who are basically suffering from the weather conditions because yesterday there was a tufan there and that affected a lot of the tents. You got people like Dr. Swaiman Singh, who's a very well paid doctor from New Jersey, who's left all that and concentrating full time on helping the people in Punjab and in the actual Morcha sites. So the farmers, a lot of them are going on shift patterns now because they're having to go back and do their actual farming for the harvest of Vaisakhi. But they're going to be back in 2-3 weeks' time, and there's still a lot of people there. So what would be fantastic for them, as they're all going back, is for people in London, people in UK, people in Birmingham, saying that, nahi, assi bhi haje tuhade naal hai. Because that's what the Buzurgs will say. Sade bache shayad bahar chal gaye, par assi nahi bhulliyan sadi zameena, assi nahi bhulle sade Gurdware, Darbar Sahib and all of that. The langar is only going to carry on if the Sangat and all the pens around it keeps giving langar to it. है ਜੇ ਸਾਡੀ ਜ਼ਮੀਨਾਂ ਚਲ ਗਈਆਂ ਤਾਂ ਸਾਡਾ ਸਾਰਾ ਇਤਿਹਾਸ, all of everything's at risk. There's already cases where Ashote Sahibzade, our history of them, and they're building golf courses on them. All of this stuff is only going to be there if we raise our voices for that.
Thank you for your time, and thank you for telling us about your book and for giving us updates and about your message. ਹੁਣ ਆਪਾਂ ਜਾਣਦੇ ਆ ਜੀ ਇੱਕ ਹੋਰ ਸੰਦੇਸ਼ੇਵਾਰ ਅਕਸਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਪੁੱਛਦੇ ਆ, ਆਪਾਂ ਵੀ ਕਿਹਾ ਸੀਗਾ ਕਿ ਜੋ ਕਿਸਾਨਸ ਇਨ ਨੀਡ ਲਈ ਪੈਸੇ MLS SS ਵਾਲਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਆਪਾਂ ਰੇਜ਼ ਕਰਕੇ ਦਿੱਤੇ ਸੀ ਉਹ ਕਿੱਥੇ ਖਰਚੇ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਆ ਉਹ ਆਪਾਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਹਰ ਹਫਤੇ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਦਿਖਾ ਰਹੇ ਆ ਕਿ ਜੀ ਕਿੰਨੇ ਪੈਸੇ ਦਿੱਤੇ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਆ ਕਿਹੜੇ ਪਰਿਵਾਰਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਦਿੱਤੇ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਆ ਆਲਸੋ MLS ਦੀ ਵੈਬਸਾਈਟ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਇੱਕ ਡੈਡੀਕੇਟਿਡ ਪੇਜ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸਕਰੋਲ ਥੱਲੇ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੀ ਆ ਜਿਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਲਿੱਕ ਕਰਕੇ ਪਤਾ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਜੀ ਪੂਰਾ ਹਿਸਾਬ ਕਿਤਾਬ ਉੱਥੇ ਇੱਕ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਪਾਉਂਡ ਦਾ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਪਿਆ ਆ ਇੱਕ ਪੈਨੀ ਦਾ ਕਿ ਕੌਣ ਪੈਸੇ ਕਿਹੜੇ ਪਰਿਵਾਰਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਆ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਚੱਲ ਰਿਹਾ ਕਿੰਨੀ ਕਿਸ਼ਤਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਆ ਜਾਂ ਕਿੰਨਾ ਬਲਕ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਆ ਹੁਣ ਆਪਾਂ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਜੀ ਇੱਕ ਮੈਸੇਜ ਵੱਲ ਰਣਧੀਰ ਸਿੰਘ ਜੋ ਹੀਰ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਜੋ ਦਿਖਾ ਰਹੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਿ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਉਹ ਪੈਸੇ ਕਿੱਥੇ ਡਿਸਟਰੀਬਿਊਟ ਹੋ ਰਹੇ ਆ ਅਤੇ ਮਿਲਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਜੀ ਇਹ ਵੀਡੀਓਜ਼ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ